Courage the Cowardly Dog's Ball of Revenge was an episode that I was originally going to be reviewing as part of Cartoon Crisis 2 nearly 3 years ago, but I scrapped that in favor of other episode reviews during that time. And to be perfectly real with you, even though that I'm not a fan of Courage the Cowardly Dog, I'm aware of what the show is about, and I've watched the show during my childhood by watching other Cartoon Network shows at the time. And with this being part of the final season of the show, with it being close to being one of the final episodes, it really shows that the people who worked on this episode wanted to have a villain team up of all the antagonists from this show to go down Courage, but due to the execution of itself being the biggest problem of them all, it really shows that people did not like this episode, knowing full well that they consider this as one of the worst episodes from Courage the Cowardly Dog. The beginning of the episode begins with Mario making a blanket for Courage, which causes jealousy from Lucius, and since that this is the type of character who hates Courage and just is messing with Courage because he can't stand with him, unlike his relationship with Mario, this is where he draws the line by calling all of Courage's worst enemies. Just when Mario was about to find out about Lucius's plan, the villains chain her above a liquid boiling pot. And for the rest of the episode, Courage needs to save Mario from Lucius and also the antagonists. I think I discussed everything about the plot of this episode, and yet I have to discuss the biggest problems of what makes this episode difficult for me to take itself seriously, and the fact that it's mainly a torture episode for Courage. This is yet another episode focusing on a main character getting tortured for no reason, and the fact that the handicap position that they're in is way over the line. Now, I understand that this show is mostly popular when it comes to its villains, and even though there may be other aspects involving Courage's reactions and mimicking on what is really going on while the other characters just don't understand what he's talking about, it doesn't change the fact that the villains themselves, while good in their own episodes from the show, don't contribute much other than just torturing Courage, because keep in mind that some of the villains, or maybe all of them, had tortured Mario and Lucius, not just Courage. And the fact that Lucius managed to have them be on his side just doesn't make any sense. And since that this was around the time where cartoons aren't being taken themselves seriously, and which is really saying a lot when it comes to shows like Courage the Cowardly Dog, where it does take itself seriously, what I mean by that is mainly the characters working together method that just doesn't make any sense. Codename Kids Next Door did an episode centering around that where number 4 recruited the villains, but at least it made sense because there was some kind of execution in that works a lot more better than this episode. And in all honesty, number 4 played the role of recruiting the villains much more better than Lucius, which is really saying a lot considering that number 4 is intentionally being dumb in Codename Kids Next Door. And while Lucius has reasons of being grumpy, considering that he cannot stand Courage, the fact that he's using these villains just to take down a dog who's just using the blanket that it's mainly for him, and the fact that he's calling the villains out of petty just to take him down, I'm not buying it. Like, I get it. Lucius cannot stand Courage, and they don't have a loving relationship, unlike Courage has with Mario. But at the same time, whenever I look at Lucius in this episode and the fact that he's just doing all of this just to get rid of Courage, what would Mario think if Courage is gone? And the thing is, when Mario is being chained up on the wall, the suffering she gets is the villains messing up her laundry. That's literally it. You know, when characters like Mario have less to lose, and the less is mainly the laundry, since that they live in the middle of nowhere, I'm starting to get convinced that the people who wrote this joke or this plot element clearly don't know what to do with Emilio in this, so that's why they have to make her suffer by seeing the other villains mess up her laundry. And Courage fixing the laundry midway through a dodgeball game, it doesn't make any sense, and it's not even humorous. Because for me personally, Courage, while being tortured, doesn't do much in this episode other than just trying to find a way to stop all the villains that he went through the majority of this entire show. And the thing is, with this being one of the early 2000 cartoons, granted this came out in the end of the 1990s, but mainly this episode in the early 2000s, this episode just doesn't take itself seriously completely when it comes to Courage being the main character of this episode. And since that he was the main character in so many episodes, since that his name is the title of the show, it really feels like that he can't be able to experience a lot on trying to dodge obstacles while dealing with the handicap situation in front of all the villains. I understand that he is supposed to be a coward, that's the point of his character, but judging of how that Lucius is having the upper hand against Courage in this, and the fact that Courage's main objective to stop all of this is to save Emilio while not giving up, it really makes the second half of this episode uncomfortable for people who see Courage being tortured this way. And believe me when I say this, when the other episodes tortured Courage, it's actually done in the correct way, since that Courage is dealing with obstacles that he hasn't dealt with upon doing it for the first time. And the fact that he is just going through all this, and the fact that most of it is new to him, it really makes me question onto how he manages to go through all this without surrendering. And in all honesty, the fact that Lucius is just enjoying the pain from Courage, and the fact that his punishment at the end, which we'll get to later, isn't as severe as it is, it really shows that episodes from this show, along with the same elements from other episodes from other shows, don't take themselves seriously when it comes to punishment and literally having the obstacles being the same as before while having an ending that actually works out the end. Maybe there's a reason onto why I scrapped this episode in favor of other episodes during Cartoon Crisis 2, because when I think about this episode 3 years ago, it's mainly about a character getting tortured over something that he doesn't deserve. But the more I think about it and the more I get into these types of episodes as the years gone by, it really feels like that the more new things I've seen, they contribute less of the problems of what the main conflicts have. Mainly the characters getting tortured. And for me personally, I think there's a reason onto why no one instantly gets that much of a severe punishment when they do a bad deed in these episodes. Granted, Ed and Eddie came out at the same time and they did multiple punishments involving bad deeds from the main characters. But when it comes to this is far worse than any of the bad deeds that Ed and Eddie did, well, except for the scam that they did in the movie. So, do you want to know how Courage manages to win against the villains that he fought through the majority of this show? He screams really loud, which causes the entire house to be crumbled into bits, resulting in him being the winner of his encounters of the villains and Lucius. Let me tell you, I know that this is what Courage is known for during the majority of the show, but with this being the only way for him to win, it just feels really, really weird and off-putting. Like, I can understand that this is supposed to be a long time coming for him to use his scream to good use, but at the same time, it really feels like it's literally the only way for Courage to face off the villains in the most underwhelming way possible. This isn't satisfying to see Courage scream and win, because Judging of how that the other characters can do a lot more severe, and the fact that Courage's only ability is to scream louder that causes the entire building to collapse. I'm just gonna say that it's out of pure luck that Courage manages to use a scream to win against the antagonists. I know it's weird to think about it, but at the same time, I know full well that Courage isn't brave, and even though I do not watch this show like I used to, I can easily tell that I remember the aspects of what Courage went through on facing off villains in different attributes than just screaming. And the punishment that Lucius gets after torturing Courage and hanging Miria up against a wall is him resting on the blanket while Courage sits in his chair. I'm gonna be really honest with you, the punishment in this just feels really lackluster, considering that I don't think that these characters are willing to make a punishment or consequences against another character work out. And even if they did before this, I'm just saying this mainly to themselves, not the villains from previous, just themselves in this, since that Miria, Lucius, and Courage are part of a family in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's the lack of communication that they can't be able to figure out an actual consequences that actually suits well, but if that's literally the only reason, then it really shows that the people who put Courage and the others, mainly Miria and Lucius, in the middle of nowhere way too literally. And the episode ends while Courage freaks out by seeing Freaky Fred on TV, which causes the house to collapse yet again. You know, I'm starting to think that the main motivation of this episode was to have the villains unite, and that's literally the only plan that they have, while not focusing on anything else in the episode. Maybe it really shows onto why that this is one of the worst episodes because of how unfocused it is. This episode just proves to me that not every show needs to have the villains unite in order to face off a main character or team, because the fact that this episode's execution is what drags this episode down when it comes to that main plot point. I really felt like that they could have done this a lot more better if Lucius wasn't the main antagonist in this episode. The villains teaming up with Lucius that causes retcons in previous episodes, since that they're enemies towards Lucius and it makes no sense for them to team up with him. There was a lot going on in this episode that just raises more questions than the whole villains unite against the main character gimmick. It just doesn't. And considering that the villains in this show, while creative, aren't taking themselves completely seriously when it comes to the decisions afterwards, there's a reason onto why nowadays cartoon characters have consistency. Granted, there are consistency in these villains, but not in the way of what I'm describing. I'm giving this episode a 2.75 out of 10. It maybe been almost 3 years, but I finally got the chance to review this episode. Better late than never.